It's Friday, November 2nd. I'm Paul Joseph Watson. This is INFOWARS Nightly News.
Tonight on the INFOWARS Nightly News, the Obama administration shoots itself in the foot as the potential for re-election drives gun sales. Then, 72 hours after the hurricane, survivors go to desperate measures to feed themselves, and British hospitals make money euthanizing patients. All that and more coming up on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
Now, before we get to the news, we're going to throw to this clip with Alex Jones because there's been a deluge of Big Brother and police state news over the past couple of days. So here's Alex to cover it.
Thomas Jefferson was once asked, how much tyranny will humanity put up with? And he said, the answer is the exact level you will put up with. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not a virtue to lay down to corruption. It is not a virtue to worship at the feet of authoritarian government. It is a death sentence. Alex Jones here reporting for INFOWARS.com on some shocking new developments. It's moving so fast, I can't even believe it. Sure, over in England now, most families, when they have a newborn child, the government goes and installs a camera in their house for 6 months to make sure they're not abusing them. Guilty until proven slave. Not even guilty until proven innocent. Beyond 1984. Sure, I see Pennsylvania and California and other states getting caught watching kids at home on government-issued laptops. It's unbelievable. I get blown away by the fact that all over the country, the federal government is telling school districts to tell parents they can't be trusted to pack school lunches for their kids, and then the school lunches are incredibly unhealthy garbage. The list goes on and on. The NSA warrantless wiretapping against the American people, which they admit is going on, and they admit is illegal, but they're going to keep doing it. The NDAA, the list goes on and on. But just today, 3 separate articles up at INFOWARS.com, PrisonPlanet.com, also saw some of these at DrudgeReport.com. CNET News, court okays warrantless use of hidden surveillance cameras on your property without a warrant. That is CNET News, a division of CBS. In your face, saying, well, they can come on your property, your backyard, whatever, and as long as it's not in the house, they can set up cameras on your property without a warrant. Oh, but it gets worse. They now have another case going to the Supreme Court where Florida versus Jardines, the state is arguing that they want to be able to have the police randomly go to your door and knock on it, just down the street with police dogs, just like Nazi Germany, classic archetypal sign of all that. They want to be able to just come up with their police dog, and if it smells something, they're going to come in your house without a warrant. When the dog is, obviously the Beagle or whatever, or German Shepherd, is getting the biscuits when it does this. When the government's on record shipping in most of the narcotics, and big banks have been caught laundering hundreds of billions a year. Just type in Wachovia, Wells Fargo, $378 billion in laundered drug money over a 2-year period. I mean, just Google what I just said, or startpage.com. The point is, it's over the top. They ship the drugs in and then use the war on it as a pretext to come into all our lives. And then use the crime that drug prohibition causes, because the drug addicts are running around trying to get the money for the overpriced garbage. They use the crime to take our liberties. So there's that report from the New American Magazine, newamerican.com, also at PrisonPlanet.com. Has the Fourth Amendment gone to the dogs? And they've already got knock and talk, where they come and ask if they can come in and see your legal guns going on nationwide under federal grants. And here's one from Americans for Tax Reform. New Obamacare tax reform mandates Americans report personal health ID info to the IRS. Well, I have 50-plus crew members and contractors and people, so we're now mandated. None of my crew wants me to get them insurance. They all want their own. They'd rather be paid the money and make their own decision. But we're, now here in America, got to do this, so we're looking into it. And yeah, our HR people have looked at it. It's true. All of us with the tax returns will have to file our ID, our health ID, and then it's basically a waiver for the IRS to go in and look at all your medical records. The IRS has been used to go after political enemies, the IRS that the government puts people on enemy list. Now the entire federal government, when there's federal laws to protect your privacy, when you waive your rights of self-incrimination to the IRS, they make you sign the form waiving your right under threat of them coming and taking your house to let them have all your medical records. And the article breaks all of that down and links to it, and I can confirm I've read the legislation. This is what it does. Now the IRS, the collection agency for the private Federal Reserve that we pay all our banker bailout money to, that's where most of our tax money goes, to these foreign banks. The foreign bankers that have bragged that they've occupied America on CNBC and in the news. Now, you've seen the clips where they say, oh, we're slaves to global government under banks. You know, Goldman Sachs conquered Europe. I mean, they now install leaders in Italy and places like that, Greece, that are bankers. They call themselves technocrats. This is illegitimate, it's fraudulent, and it's only getting worse. Worldwide, global government with a bunch of crooks, with dogs coming up to our door randomly and saying they smell something, so the cops come in. And cameras in the backyard of your house with no warrants. And all of this. Enough is enough. Okay? It's time to say no. And don't give me that crap about Al-Qaeda. It was all over Reuters today when I reported a year ago that our government's funding Al-Qaeda in Libya and Syria. That's who that is Al-Qaeda. Just murdering people and blowing stuff up, and the Peace Prize president's up there. I've had enough of it. Socialism is nothing but fascism. They try to say they're two different things. It's all the same thing. Authoritarianism. They just rearranged deck chairs on the Titanic a little bit different. I'll be covering this all, of course, right here on INFOWARS Nightly News. And then, of course, back on the radio tomorrow, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Central, INFOWARS.com and PrisonPlanet.com. We are the front lines of the resistance, and I want to thank all of you for your support. You're standing right beside us, not behind us. We couldn't have done any of this without your support and without your prayers. But now is the time to redouble our efforts against the globalists, because they know humanity's waking up, so they are accelerating their operation. Zbigniew Brzezinski even wrote a book this year admitting that. He's one of their top technicians, one of their top overlords or dark, I don't know what the term is, sorcerers of political evil. All right, that's it. Just this is wrong. This is not for your security. The state is the ultimate threat to security, and we got a big, bad, cancerous one that is out of control, the biggest government the world's ever seen. One last article right here. Daily Mail. Remember a few years ago I had scientists on and reported off of their own admissions that bisphenol A and other plastic additives that they chose to put in, we have the government documents the last 50 years, are making girls at age 3, not just 6, go into puberty all over the world. And they admit junk food, plastic packaging, the list goes on and on. They allow these chemicals to be in additives of the junk food. And they don't want you to be able to have it labeled to get away from it. And ladies and gentlemen, this makes women go hyper-feminine, makes men feminine, and that's why breast cancer is exploding, one of the biggest factors. And remember, George Soros outfits attacked me, and it was all over the news. It said, Alex Jones says juice boxes make you gay. Do you remember that? You know, something silly. And they had all the gay and lesbian groups come out and attack me, saying I was bashing them, and I don't even get into those issues. No, we are chemically being attacked. They are killing us, okay? I told you this a long time ago. This has been known since the frickin' 50s, okay? But they take one little clip of me going, that's why you see so many people having sexual confusion and not knowing. Some people are born like that naturally, okay? And no hate towards those people. The point is, when the streams and rivers have the runoff of this, the frogs and the fish are bisexual. Okay, it's not that I'm obsessed with gay fish. It's that we're being chemically killed. It's not that, this poor little girl, going into puberty at age 6, ladies and gentlemen, that's Brave New World. That's what Aldous Huxley wrote about in Brave New World, which he later admitted in '62. And in Brave New World Revisited nonfiction, that was a real plan. Okay, this is all a frickin' plan of the eugenicist. You gotta get angry. You gotta get out of your trance. You gotta take action. You gotta wake people up, for heaven's sakes. Please, for humanity's sake, break out of your trance. All right, I'm signing off for InfoWars.com. The rest is up to you.
Top story tonight on InfoWars Nightly News. Gun sales surge in fear of Obama re-election. This is an InfoWars.com story, and it's also posted up on the Drudge Report. Fears that Barack Obama would use a lame duck second term to eviscerate gun rights are fueling record firearm sales once again. with gun store owners labeling Obama, quote, the best gun salesman we've had. Despite a new law allowing carrying without a permit, concealed firearm permits in the fiercely independent state of Wyoming in the last quarter have smashed records set in previous years. Quote, people are definitely scared of a president who has voted against guns when he was a senator, Anthony Bouchard, director of the Wyoming Gun Owners Association in Cheyenne, told the Wyoming Star Tribune. Quote, if Obama gets re-elected, he's in a lame duck session and he can do the things he wants to. That's what we're afraid of. So gun sales basically continue through the roof. Ruger just announced 188 billion sales for the previous quarter, just smashing all expectations. Smith & Wesson are showing similar numbers, you know, thriving even amidst this economic collapse. And the trend looks set to continue. So we've got the threat of mayhem from Obama supporters who have promised to riot if he loses. We've got the example of Hurricane Sandy, of course, widespread looting of homes in several different areas, where, of course, gun control is the most strict. Only the criminals can own guns, so they enjoy a target-rich environment. That's why you wouldn't get as much looting if the hurricane had hit other areas. And, of course, as mentioned, the major threat posed by a lame duck Obama administration. So all these factors play into the fear that the Second Amendment will be restricted, which is why gun sales continue to climb. And let's not forget that just a month before the Fast and Furious scandal broke, Barack Obama was promising Sarah Brady that he was working on something, quote, under the radar to eviscerate gun rights. So is Obama going to come after the Second Amendment during a lame duck term if he's victorious? Gun owners certainly think so. And of course, Mitt Romney's record on gun control fails to instill much confidence either. So a lot of fears over gun control, and that's why you see the sales continuing to surge in many different areas of the country. Republican National Committee alleges voting machine troubles in Nevada, other swing states. This is out of the Reno Gazette-Journal. Secretary of State Ross Miller called claims of voter machine irregularities in Nevada by the Republican National Committee, quote, irresponsible and unfortunate. Miller, a Democrat, was responding to a letter sent to his office and election officials in 5 other states on Thursday, in which the RNC alleged voting machines cast ballots for President Barack Obama, a Democrat, when the vote was intended for his Republican challenger, former Massachusetts Governor Mitt Romney. So Miller's dismissing these examples of voting irregularities as, quote, rumor, media reports, and hearsay, despite the fact that they've been admittedly taking place in several different states. We've seen the stories over the past week or two. And so the people attempting to draw attention to this, to express concern about it, are being called, quote, reprehensible merely for expressing concern. And yet we've had voters in Marion County just a week ago. They vote for Romney. The electronic voting machine flips it for Obama. We've had voters in Guilford County, North Carolina, experiencing the exact same problem. And these people literally had to vote 3 times before the machine actually displayed the right result. So, of course, there are problems. And attacking the people, drawing attention to them, is just asinine. I mean, you know, electronic voting machines have been plagued with problems at every major election since they were first used. So to attack the people drawing attention to these problems is reprehensible. And then, furthermore, to claim that their examples are based on hearsay, when the election officials in those very counties have admitted that the errors are taking place, that is reprehensible. And of course, Nevada is the same county where, if you remember the constitutionalist, the woman who tried to get the fluoride out of the water, she actually ran on that as part of her platform. Sharon Angle narrowly lost to Harry Reid after all the polls showed her beating him. When the electronic voting machines had Reid's name pre-checked on the screen. So there was a massive furor about that. Reid ended up being the victor. And actually, Sharon Angle later wrote in a book that he stole the election. And so in this same county, these people are calling the RNC reprehensible merely for drawing attention to the fact that these problems are happening once again. And, you know, we've endorsed neither candidate, but the fact that these voting machines are still in use with no requirement that they produce a paper receipt. That's what's really reprehensible, not the people who are merely trying to draw attention to what is an admitted problem. Real Clear Politics reports James Baker, not entirely unlikely that we might have a recount. Quote, there are 3 or 4 states today that require a recount if the result is within a certain number of percentage points. This is from Secretary of State James Baker, former Secretary of State. This is what he said about the possibility of a recount. Let's go to the clip.
You headed up the effort during the recount. I remember well. If this is as close as it may be, you know very well that there are lawyers gearing up for plane flights to whatever state they may have to go to.
There are 3 or 4 states today, Brett, that require a recount if the result is within a certain number of percentage points. And so it's not entirely unlikely that we might have a recount.
Now, you might have seen the story yesterday where actor Richard Belzer predicted that, quote, America would explode if Mitt Romney were to win by a slender margin. And given the fact that hundreds of Obama supporters are threatening to riot if Romney does win, I mean, this is obviously a very concerning issue. The national polls are virtually neck and neck now. The swing states are also tight, but they show that Obama is the slender favorite. And of course, in Ohio, they're saying that it could be a 10-day wait because of the tightness of the race until we actually find out the winner. So it's a very good point that Baker makes, that it could be a recount, it could be a disputed election. And I mean, police departments across the United States, in an article, I believe it was in Politico a couple of weeks ago, said they had no concerns about unrest on election night or in the days following, even though, as we said, hundreds of Obama supporters were on Twitter threatening to riot if Obama lost. So that gap between voting and any potential recount is certainly going to be tension-filled. And if there is going to be any trouble, I mean, that's the fertile ground for when it's going to take place. And of course, the Department of Homeland Security has been preparing for such unrest for many months now, with the riot gear, the massive bullet buys that we've seen from the DHS in recent months. So that's definitely one to watch. Lou Rockwell blog reports out of the mouths of babes. Asked why she is crying, this sad little 4-year-old girl, Abigail Evans, expresses the heartfelt feelings of millions the mainstream media will never interview. Let's see the clip.
Just because I'm tired of Barack Obama and Mitt Romney.
That's why you're crying? Oh, it'll be over soon, Abby. Okay? The election will be over soon, okay?
Okay.
Oh.
And I think we can all sympathise with what she's going through. Max Larvo of SHTF Plan reports shock 72 hours after grid down, starvation, supply shortages, food lines, no clean water, no gas, transportation, standstill. He's of course talking about the aftermath of Hurricane Sandy. A recent study noted that the majority of people have enough food in their pantries to feed their household for about 3 days, and that seemingly stable societies are really just 9 meals from anarchy, with most of us dependent on just-in-time transportation systems to always be available. Few ever consider the worst-case scenario. For tens of thousands of East Coast residents, that worst-case scenario is now playing out in real time. No longer are images of starving people waiting for government handouts restricted to just the third world. In the midst of crisis, once civilized societies will very rapidly descend into chaos when essential infrastructure systems collapse. So obviously we've got the horrible situation now, just a few days post Hurricane Sandy. We already see images of Americans, you know, dumpster diving, getting into fistfights over gas, begging for food, looting homes and businesses in many different areas. And according to the latest reports, which I was just reading before we came on air, the situation's only getting worse. There are reports of people defecating in hallways. They're saying it could be at least another week until the power is restored. And all this chaos that we've seen over the past 48 hours, of course, occurred in just the first 3-4 days after the hurricane hit. So, I mean, just imagine what a crisis that lasted weeks or months would do to a major metropolitan area. And of course, we had the pathetic images of people crowded around Starbucks outlets because they couldn't live for a day without their Wi-Fi access. That was the most important thing to him. And that video, those images of people picking through trash for rotten food, is of course a stinging rebuttal to all those who the establishment characterized as paranoid or crazy for buying storable food. Those people are laughing right now. In fact, there were many people featured on that National Geographic program, Doomsday Preppers, that were living in New York and had months and months of storable food. You're not going to see them picking through dumpsters. And remember, this is a government that characterizes preppers who buy food in bulk as terrorists. We had the FBI putting out the community action program flyers characterizing people who buy bulk from military surplus stores as potential terrorists. Those terrorists are now feeding themselves while a lot of people in New York and other areas are picking through trash. So despite the fact that, many commentators have ludicrously claimed that this hurricane fallout shows the need for more power to be concentrated into federal hands, it's the very people who chose to live their lives in a way diametrically opposed to that whole idea of dependence on the state that have coped the best. They're the ones thriving. They're the ones that are able to feed their families. So as this article out of SHTF Plan points out, it sounds harsh, but you really can have no sympathy for these people who have been forced to pick through trash simply to feed themselves. They refused to get prepared, and now they're reaping the consequences. They were warned. They didn't listen. And we've been warning for years that when society breaks down, even temporarily, as it is in this case, you cannot rely on the government to feed you. That's why we promote storable food. That's why everybody else in this movement does. And I think they've been proven accurate. They've been vindicated by the events of the past week. So Hurricane Sandy has been a major poster child for self-sufficiency, but it's also been a benchmark for illustrating how dependent Americans are in these major cities on the status quo, when that status quo is only going to be upset to an even greater degree in the years to come. So the preppers were vindicated. The crazy paranoid terrorists who bought all the storable food are able to feed themselves and are not picking through trash. If you listen to your government and said, nothing's going to happen, government's going to take care of you, then you'd be out on the street like the rest of them. British hospitals make millions euthanizing patients. This is out of the New American. Who says crime doesn't pay? According to London's Daily Telegraph, British hospitals are euthanizing patients at ever-increasing rates and raking in big bucks as a result. Documents obtained by the newspaper under the Freedom of Information Act reveal that nearly 2/3 of National Health Service trusts, regional authorities that administer hospitals, quote, have received millions of pounds for hitting targets related to the use of Liverpool Care Pathway, LCP, a controversial end-of-life care program. Developed by Liverpool Hospice to relieve the suffering of terminally ill cancer patients during their final days, the LCP is essentially a death sentence meted out by doctors. A physician who considers a patient to be near death may put the patient on the pathway, after which the patient will be heavily sedated and may have food and water withheld. So it's like a Terry Schiavo kind of situation that we saw, 6-7 years ago, where she was basically starved to death. On average, patients die within 33 hours of being put on the LCP. So there, again, is your wonderful socialist healthcare system. I constantly hear these Obamacare supporters lauding the virtues of the British state-run healthcare system. And my response is, what planet are you living on? It's dreadful. Every single experience I've ever had with it, anyone I've ever talked to has had with it, has been dreadful. Why are you trying to emulate this? But, I guess since a lot of these leftists also support drastic population reduction measures, then, you know, where's the harm in letting Granny die? It's a drain on the system, isn't it, in their eyes? I mean, why not institute Bill Gates' death panel suggestion and just spend the money on teachers instead? That's new liberalism, apparently. Of course, first it's Granny, then it's a disabled person, then it's someone with a low IQ, and down the rabbit hole we go. Neo-eugenics is not something that should be aspired to. Now we're going to go to this video with Melissa Melton about how the media, on that same subject of population reduction, how the media is pushing overpopulation myths. Let's go to the clip.
Every day, the mainstream media inundates us with articles talking about how the Earth is overpopulated and humans need to die in order to save the world. They throw out the number 7 billion like it's an accusation and a curse, talking about how we're basically parasites and we're sucking the Earth dry of resources. Every day you see these stories come out, like in Time, where they talk about how to die. In the LA Times, they asked the question, the world's biggest problem, and they answered it with too many people. One Washington Post op-ed even said, living within our global means will require a radical drop in the Earth's population starting now. And they saw it fit to publish that. So the mainstream media continues to program us to accept population control and tell us the world is overpopulated as if this is just an incontrovertible fact. They use broad, vague terms, throwing that out there. But if you actually go and look at the data, every industrialized nation is having either a 0 population growth rate or even a negative population growth rate. Birth rates are down across the map. Fertility rates are down across the map. And in the United States, birth rates have even fallen to the lowest level since the Great Depression. And last year, our fertility rates were the lowest on recorded U.S. record. Some of the countries that have the highest birth rates are in Africa, like Niger and Uganda. However, these countries also have some of the lowest life expectancies, where people are only living to be in their 40s and 50s. Now, on the other hand, what is rising is disease rates. The World Health Organization has brought forth evidence to show that Alzheimer's is going to be doubling every 20 years. Childhood leukemia and brain cancers are going up 1% every year for the last 20, and autoimmune disorders are rocketing off the charts. What this clearly suggests is that we're having an environmental factor at play here, because human genes don't change this fast. What environmental factors might those be? Well, take your pick. Vaccines, GMO, fluoride, chemtrails. Big Pharma kills more people every year than most cancers except for lung. Yesterday, we even covered a story linking aspartame to several types of cancer. But overpopulation is a myth, and the way they have this added on is they take the depopulation agenda and they tuck it into the green movement. So they make you feel all good and warm inside about doing something good for the environment, and then they just add on the fact that we need to depopulate the Earth, that we need to have less children, and that you need to kill your grandma so that you can protect the world. And the Population Research Institute has actually put out a video entitled Overpopulation is a Myth, and we're going to go to that clip right now.
Who claimed that reckless human reproduction had overwhelmed the Earth. Massive famines would result, which would destroy, best case scenario, 1/5 of humanity by the end of the 70s. And the planet would follow. This fear produced large donations for the newly created UNFPA, which thrives on an imagined crisis that has been both imminent and rescheduled again and again over the past 2 centuries. The population of Earth will peak in 30 years, and then start to go back down. We're not overpopulated. Do the math.
PRI isn't the only institute that's come out to say that every family on Earth could have a house with a yard in a landmass the size of Texas. And Texas is only 269,000 square miles of the Earth's 57.5 million, if that gives you any indication. And over the years, we have eugenicists coming out saying we need to depopulate the Earth for various reasons, whereas today we have billionaire eugenicists like Al Gore coming forward, pushing the carbon tax initiative. He wants you to pay taxes on breathing, and he stands to make billions off of these should they pass, so that he can fly around in private jets and spend $30,000 a year on his utility bills for his mansion. And he's not alone. We have other billionaire eugenicists up there with him, like Ted Turner and Bill Gates. Let's go to a clip of these guys.
More American servicemen
are dying now
suicide.
From suicide over there than are dying in combat.
I mean, that's shocking, isn't it?
Well, no, I think it's good.
And so the access that used to be available to the middle class or whatever is just rapidly going away. That's a trade-off society is making because of very, very high medical costs and a lack of willingness to say, is spending $1 million on that last 3 months of life for that patient, would it be better not to lay off those 10 teachers? But that's called the death panel, and you're not supposed to have that discussion.
So as you can see, there's Ted Turner telling us that it's really great that troops are committing suicide in mass record numbers, and Bill Gates telling us we need to kill our grandmothers so that we can hire more teachers. Notice all of these guys are advocating population reduction, but none of them are personally volunteering. Also, keep in mind this number 7 billion that they keep pushing out. Scientists, that's an estimate that scientists have. Other studies are coming out now to say that the world is actually a third less populated than they thought before based on using the wrong models. But the bottom line is here that we have billionaire eugenicists like Al Gore, Ted Turner, and Bill Gates with wealth, power, and influence using that to basically play God and decide who gets to live and die. And the bought and paid for mainstream media continues to push this idea that you need to have less children, you need to kill your grandmother, and that people need to die so that we can all save the earth. The bottom line here is that we're being lied to. We're being poisoned and we're being robbed on a massive scale. Overpopulation is a myth and it's a scam. I'm Melissa Melton for INFOWARS Nightly News.
Thanks, Melissa, and that wraps up the news for tonight. Now we're going to turn to our quote of the day, which is from Gore Vidal. Quote, "As societies grow decadent, language grows decadent too. Words are used to disguise, not to illuminate action. You liberate a city by destroying it. Words are to confuse so that at election time, people will solemnly vote against their own interests." That's Gore Vidal. And isn't that appropriate, of course, given the recent We Are Change video, which proved that Obama supporters would not vote for him if they actually knew his policies. But they bought the rhetoric, they've been deceived by it, and that's how elections in the United States are run. We're going to go to a break now on INFOWARS Nightly News, but be sure to catch our election night coverage coming up Tuesday, November 6th. The guys will be in the studio from 5 p.m. to midnight covering the entire Dog and Pony show. So be sure to tune in to Infowars.com to catch our special election night coverage Tuesday, November 6th. I'm going to go to a break now. Stay tuned. More after this.
Every 4 years, the United States of America hears the drumbeat of billions. Every 4 years, the United States of America hears the drumbeat of billions of campaign dollar attack ads, meaningless debates with empty analysis, and poll after poll after poll. This can only mean one thing. It's time to pick our globalist puppet leader.
We're going to be left with a choice of a lesser of two evils.
They continue to vote for these Democrats and Republicans, the people that are wrecking our country, and yet they still vote for them.
Unlike North Korea and China, we Americans have the illusion of choice this November 6th. Will it be globalist puppet A or puppet B?
I think that a lot of votes are going to be stolen by the millions. In fact, I can give you a pretty solid number, about at least 5.9 million, because I'm a statistician. I worked from the government's raw data. About 5.9 million votes are going to go kapoof.
I don't know how you could possibly have voter fraud when your son owns the voting machines.
Tune in to the live video streams at PrisonPlanet TV or Infowars.com from 5 p.m. to midnight Central. Alex Jones will be live with some great special guests to cover what is in store for our country as we march into the arms of the New World Order. And tune in Wednesday for more live, free stream election fallout coverage from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central. Coke or Pepsi, Romney or Obama? The choice is not up to you. So join us as we talk about the real issues facing our country. Guests will include Gerald Celente, Wayne Madsen, Max Kaiser, Paul Craig Roberts, Lou Rockwell, Nomi Prinz, and Webster Tarpley. We will have live sheeple updates from polling centers and political parties around Austin. Which management team from Slavery Incorporated will run the country into oblivion for the next 4 years? Tune in to Infowars.com or Prison Planet TV this Tuesday, November 6th and Wednesday, November 7th as another meaningless pageant is played out. The streams will be free, so send the link below to all your friends on Facebook and Twitter.
As part of our live election coverage this Tuesday and Wednesday, we're not going to just give you rigged vote totals. We're going to give you the chance to vote early and vote often in our multiple polls. We want to know what you think of this election, what matters to you, and what you think will happen now. And if you have any questions you'd like to see included in a poll, you can email those to davidk@infowars.com or tweet them using the hashtag #PuppetPrez. And don't forget, the election coverage is not only live, but it's free on PrisonPlanet.tv.
While we fight to retain our liberty, while we fight to expose globalism, we have to realize we're talking about a very powerful combination of power.
Renowned author and expert Joel Skousen breaks down the globalist plan to shut down America and stage a new world war.
In one day, America will go from day to night. And if you haven't prepared in advance, there's not enough time to prepare in 24 hours, even if you saw it that early.
Coming to the InfoWar in November is our new documentary film presentation.
Strategic relocation is a systematic way to think strategically in the future about how do I safeguard.
Joel Skousen, Strategic Relocation.
The freeways are going to be crowded, they're going to run out of gasoline, they're going to run out of food, and then they're going to start to go north and south of those freeways.
Joel Skousen is renowned as one of the world's foremost experts in strategic relocation and the securing of your home.
We talk about natural disasters, the health environment, we talk about pollution, the water quality. My personal experience about being in every one of these states.
Government is digging in for the organized, incremental collapse of society and world war.
The U.S. isn't building huge underground bases and bunkers because of some terrorist threat. They know that a massive nuclear attack is coming. They want that attack to come. Most people won't even be ready and won't be able to get out of town when any of these nuclear weapons fall, because there'll be absolute panic.
There is no preparedness without strategy.
What I tell people is that you do have time. Prepare wisely in advance.
This Christmas, give the gift of preparedness. Strategic Relocation, the film, with Joel Skousen and Alex Jones.
We're back on InfoWars Nightly News, and I'm delighted to welcome filmmaker Chris Maple, who is one of the masterminds behind the new film called The Great Culling Our Water. And you can actually go to YouTube right now and watch a 35-minute segment of this outstanding documentary, which is available at the InfoWars store, and we're going to talk about it tonight. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here, guys.
Good to have you on. So just start off by telling us the motivation behind the film and the questions you were seeking answers to at the outset.
Well, as you know, we put this film together with Paul Wittenberger, who's my co-producer for the film. He directed What in the World Are They Spraying? And I kind of worked with a little with him behind the scenes on the edit and just gathering data and that sort of thing. At the time, I wasn't really ready to come forward myself and put my face out there, really. I was doing research on my own, looking at, you know, heavy metal toxicity. I was more focused on the epidemic of neurological disorders that we're witnessing today, especially in the field of, you know, autism, Alzheimer's, all that stuff that we're seeing exploding. Once, you know, Paul's film, What in the World Are They Spraying, was done, we looked at each other and we said, here it is with these metals. What is with these metals? I guarantee you these metals are playing a role with the neurological shutoff. And, you know, at the same time I was looking into fluoride, I was looking into the GMOs and the vaccination schedule, and again, this metallic resin kept coming up over and over. And that was kind of our hunch going into it. We looked at each other and said, let's do a film. We'll look at all three topics, our food, our air, and our water. And we'll kind of look into the metallic link. And as we started digging into it, you know, our hunches were right. You know, the doctors that we were speaking to, the neurologists that we got in touch with, they basically kind of gave us the thumbs up as far as what our hunches were, and from that point on, you know, it was, I mean, geez, I think we started this thing 2 years ago, maybe. We sat down to edit it, and we had way too much information for a feature length, which is why we decided to break the film up into 3 parts. The Great Culling was going to be a 3-part one film with 3 parts, including solutions, and you know, it was just too much to edit, too much information, so we decided to break it up, as I mentioned, and here we have part 1, water, which is focuses solely on the fluoride issue.
And that's, so there's a 35-minute clip, so the full-length documentary, specifically with the water one, isn't that 90 minutes?
Yes, it is. I believe it's like 92 minutes.
Right. So there are going to be 3 films, each 90 minutes. Of course, that probably would be too long to put into one, but once you break them up into 3, you know, more easily digestible parts, I guess that makes a lot of sense. So in this clip that's on YouTube, basically you nail down the point that it's not just fluoride that's going in our water, is it? Because when they actually dump it into the water supply, it's bound to this other substance. So just tell us about the history of, you know, where the idea of putting fluoride in the water actually came from, and how the process works in actually getting it into the water supply that people drink.
Well, you know, as far as the history, we tried not to really dive too much into you know, post-1945, where we here in the United States began fluoridating our communities. And it was Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was ironic because it was right after World War II, and you know, we all know what happened after World War II with the, you know, Project Paperclip, and you know, we kind of ingested all of the National Socialistic ideology here in this country. Shortly after that, we began fluoridating our water here, as there are rumors that, you know, the prison camps fluoridated as well, and Stalin, I believe, there's some rumors that he was playing around with the fluoride as well. And as we know, it definitely is a medication. It makes us docile. It's you know, we began the program here in the United States, in Grand Rapids. You know, there's a lot that goes into, you know, the history of fluoride, and a lot of it does evolve around the atomic bomb program. What was going on is, you know, the phosphate mining industry was coming under litigation for, you know, fluoride poisoning, as was the atomic energy program, and you know, they needed some science to back up fluoride, and thus spawned, you know, Andrew Mellon and the U.S. Treasury Secretary at the time, who was also the founder of the Mellon Institution. You know, an agency notorious for giving, you know, industry the scientific data it needed to back up its claims, and especially with litigation. So it's that whole revolving door issue that we're still dealing with today between the public and the private sector, where you have, you know, gentlemen like Andrew Mellon, who was U.S. Treasury Secretary at the time, and you know, in addition to that, he was, you know, one of the founders of Alcoa, which was the aluminum company of the day that was coming under huge pressure, litigation pressure, that is, and also, you know, he, you know, founded the Mellon Institution, got the science behind it, and man, they started fluoridating shortly after that. So you got to remember, this Mellon Institution also said that asbestos was safe back in the day. You know,
I mean, it's amazing. You mentioned the Second World War and the death camps. There's actually a quote from U.S. Air Force Major George R. Jordan, and he was a US-Soviet liaison officer in the 50s, and he said the Soviets openly admitted to, quote, using the fluoride in the water supplies in their concentration camps to make the prisoners stupid, docile, and subservient. And I mean, that's just astounding, isn't it, Chris?
Well,
they would admit that.
Yeah, it's you know, if, again, you do the research, you dig it up, you will find, you know, a number of quotes like that. I mean, even in modern day, you know, we've got even former EPA scientists saying, expressing their concerns with the hazardous waste and fluoride itself. So, I mean, yeah, it's there. I mean, how deep do you want to go? I mean, that right there is a film in itself, and we could have focused on that emphasis, but we chose not to because we felt as though this fluoride community weren't really ready for that. You know, we had to kind of ease into this whole global agenda thing with them. I mean, that movement is the delicate audience that we had to kind of pump the brakes with on this film. So, you know, I've done the research. I know you have. It's there. You know, we had to. Again, we could have made this film, just this one film, 3 hours long, but you know, we had to kind of cap it.
No, I understand completely. I mean, there's a book called The Fluoride Deception, which is about 400 pages long, and probably the first third of that book is purely about all the accidents back in the 30s with the fluorine. You know, all the chemical accidents in the factories, just causing horrific injuries. And that's a whole third of the book. So you've got to make a 90-minute film. I understand you've got to focus on, you know, what's current, what's happening now. So let's get into it. I mean, we've got tons of studies. We've got Harvard studies. We've got all kinds of studies. What are some of the major health impacts of ingesting fluoride for humans?
Well, I mean, where do we begin? I mean, we've got arthritis, thyroid suppression. It's linked to most cancers. I mean, there's, what do we've got? Cardiovascular, kidney diseases, intestinal defects. And again, that gastrointestinal tract issue kind of lines up with the whole autistic thing, because that's typically the first signs of autism is in the gastrointestinal tract. You know, and, you know, when we look at these, even into the GMOs, you know, being, you know, these foods that are, you know, pesticide resistant and even pesticides themselves, well, what is the effect that these genetically modified organisms are having on the insects that digest them is gastrointestinal. So it kind of lines right up. Pineal gland suppression, we're seeing, you know, calcification in the pineal gland with the fluoride, skeletal fluorosis. Huge. Dental fluorosis is one of the most outward signs of overexposure to fluoride. Yeah, diabetes. I mean, all these things, you know, we're witnessing today in this country is, you know, it's remarkable. It just all lines up with fluoride. And you wonder why. We were talking about, you mentioned the prison camps earlier, how it made them docile. Well, you know, I tell people, look, if this you know, information doesn't bother you, if this doesn't raise an eyebrow for you, well, you can thank the fluoride for that, because it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do.
Well, actually, it's a funny thing, because I think somebody who was on my Facebook earlier had been drinking their fluoride, because I announced that I was interviewing you on the show tonight, and they actually tried to make the argument that putting fluoride in the water supply was not dangerous because they put it in at a level which is the same amount found in toothpaste, which they said was, quote, harmless. So, Chris, maybe you can address that by telling the viewers what's written on the back of a regular tube of toothpaste about people who ingest it.
Yeah, it's a good point. You know, you know, like most people, they don't read the labels, you know, and that's another reason why we got this whole issue with GMOs is, you know, people don't care what's on the label. They just assume if it's on the shelf, it's safe. Well, flip over any fluoridated toothpaste and you'll see, as you mentioned, the back side of it's got a warning label right onto it. Caution, keep out of hands of children. If swallowed more than the recommended dose, contact poison control immediately. Now, the recommended dose is a pea-size amount. I don't know about you, but when I used to put toothpaste on my toothbrush, which I still do, it's not fluoridated anymore, it was way more than a pea-size amount. It was probably 4 pea sizes. So that's 1 part per million per pea size amount. So if you're to ingest, as a child anyway, they're more susceptible just because of the size of them. You know, more than that recommended dose, they're to contact poison control. Well, let's do some math here. Fluoridated water is fluoridated right around 1 part per million. So my tap water should have a warning label right on it then, shouldn't it?
It's amazing. I mean, it's the same thing here in the UK. Under the 1972 Poisons Control Act, fluoride is actually a toxic substance, so they have to put the same warning on the back of the fluoride toothpaste here in the UK. And I mean, the fact that there's a skull and crossbones on the packaging of this stuff when it's at the water treatment facility should give you a pretty big clue as to its safety, shouldn't it, Chris?
It really should. I mean, it's ironic because we actually showed the packaging in the film, and you're right, it's got skull and bones right on the side of it, poison all over it. You know, to handle it, you need a hazmat suit. It'll eat through anything it comes in contact with. If you were to take your hazmat glove off and touch it, it'll kill you instantly. But right on the same poisonous bag in the right-hand corner, it says, you know, it says all over the bag, do not intake it, you know, do not ingest internally. And then on the right-hand side of it, it says directions for water fluoridation. So, yeah, it's some pretty nasty stuff.
I mean, it's amazing. I find it astounding that there's still this idea that's pushed by the establishment, and they even used it in a political campaign. There was a politician in Nevada called Sharon Angle who was running partly on a campaign to get the fluoride out of the water, and she was demonized by the likes of MSNBC. They basically characterized her as a paranoid kook simply for talking about fluoride in the water. So why do you think there's that kind of characteristic that's being created around people who merely discuss the idea of fluoride being bad?
Well, they're trying to protect the program. It's about business. It's about big money. It's, you know, it's again, it's the same old hat we're dealing with most of everything. And fluoride is just this big of a piece of the puzzle, as I'm sure you know, and the majority of the audience knows that as well. It's just a, you know, it's they're looking to protect the fluoridation program, not the people themselves. You know, as we've heard over and over from the CDC and you know, science is on the side of water fluoridation. There's no controversy here in the United States. Why? Obviously, yeah, in the United States, there's none. We're over, you know, almost 75% fluoridated. Nobody cares because they're drugged up. But we look outside of the U.S. and we see, you know, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, which is 97% fluoride free. China, Japan have banned it. Belgium, Austria, Denmark, Finland, France, Switzerland, Norway, Sweden. I mean, the list goes on, the number of countries that have banned it. So why are these countries banning it? Why aren't we? Why aren't we labeling it? You know, again, it just goes back to the whole issue of, you know, look at what Obama did, you know, when he was a senator and running. One of his biggest promises were, you know, I'm going to take the GMOs and label them. We have the right to know. And, you know, what did he end up go ahead and doing when he got into office? He made one of Monsanto's biggest lobbyists and attorneys. He's the head of the FDA. It's like, you know, putting a monkey in charge of the bananas. It's just nothing's going to change, you know. And it's just that whole revolving door that I was talking about between the public and private sector. As you know, the media, you know, is just as much as for sale as the scientific community today, as are the politicians. And you know, it's unfortunate, but thank goodness for programs, you know, such as Alex's show and, you know, INFOWARS and the nightly news and you know, there's a bunch of others. We got Mike Adams out there doing his job, and you know, and I'm just a regular guy. I'm not a filmmaker. You know, I'm a photographer. My wife and I run a business together. Just good friends with Paul Wittenberg. I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I basically had enough. And once I realized, you know, what really got me going was the impact that the fluoride and, you know, these metals are having on our children. And, you know, it was the vaccination program, the increase in 1983, that really got me going. And that's, you know, my whole life I've always been one to stick up for strangers and people I don't know, and, you know, battling other people's battles just because I can't stand bullies. I hate them. So, and that's kind of what got me going with this. Now I'm a father myself. I got a 5-month-old, and happy, healthy baby. Will never see a vaccination or fluoride, for that matter, or a GMO or any of that. So that's what it's all about.
I mean, completely. It's about reclaiming the power over your own body, your own health. And that's, you know, it's achievable. A lot of this stuff that we talk about, it's, you know, you can't fight City Hall. A lot of people think, well, what's the point in bothering? I can't make a difference. With your own body, your own health, the health of your family, your kids, you can make a difference. So we can win. And I mean, we're winning in Europe. You know, you mentioned Monsanto. They're getting their butts kicked all over Europe. We're winning on that front. But I mean, a question I had was, you talked about the Obama administration there. They're now pushing global warming again in light of this hurricane. Of course, that's a completely disputed science, whether man-made climate change is taking place or not. Why do you think the environmental movement is so behind the global warming agenda, whereas they don't really seem to care about toxic waste being put in the water supply?
Well, it's that whole Mother Earth thing, you know. That's what, you know, I don't know. I mean, as far as the environmental movement, again, you know, and there's a number of climatologists out there who have been silenced. When you look at the climatologists, the scientists that look at this thing on a daily basis and what their findings are, they're being silenced. Just like, you know, how many cancer cures are suppressed, how many alternative energies are suppressed, you know, how many scientists have been murdered over the past couple of decades with their findings. As far as the environmental movement, you know, I think we both know that it's going to herald in a global tax, which will then herald in that global bank that they're really trying to get their hands on, you know, with the carbon taxes. So, again, I believe it's all man-made, with, you know, with the HARP programs tied in with the geoengineering and who knows what else. But you know, and again, the people who are on the front lines aren't doing their research. They're just kind of regurgitating what the mass media is spoon-feeding them. So, you know, because they believe everything they hear as far whatever comes out of that television stream. They won't take the time to do their own research, and that's all it really takes. And that's something we wanted to kind of stress in the film too, was that you know, you don't have to be this crazy activist and, you know, out on the corner on a soapbox with your blowhorn and making a big stink, or you don't have to even go make a documentary. But you do need to do something. You do need to start at home with yourself, with your family. Take a few minutes out of your day, do a little bit of research. Don't take our word for it, because you'll come back a believer on your own just if you take a few minutes out of your day to do your own research. So.
Exactly. I mean, you mentioned scientists being shut up. It was actually Dr. Phyllis Mullinex, I don't know if I've got the pronunciation right there, but she exposed the dangers of fluoride with the rat study back in the mid-90s, and she was academically and professionally blackballed for doing so. Did you read about that case?
Yeah, we did. We actually, I think we touch on it a little bit later in the film. She actually is in there, it's just, again, it's the same story over and over, whether it's the fluoridation community, whether it's, you know, Dr. Andrew Wakefield with his vaccination studies, or, I mean, it just goes on and on. Look at Dr. William Marcus. He was the head EPA scientist, toxicologist, who first started speaking out on fluoridation, and, you know, he was ridiculed and fired, and actually, you know, sued the EPA, got his job back, and they still gave him grief, and he had to sue them again, and it was just awful what they put the poor guy through. He ended up having a stroke, and I mean, he's still around today. But Dr. David Kennedy, who's a big part of our film, is putting together a documentary himself called Fluoride Gate, and he touches on Dr. William Marcus's you know, his trials and tribulations that he had to go through. And again, these are their own scientists coming out and speaking up, and it's, you know, they're shut up.
You've got so many experts, great scientists in the film, but you also went out and asked members of the public if they knew about what was in their drinking water. What did you discover? Are most of them ignorant about fluoride, or were you surprised by the level of awareness?
Well, it was one kid we talked to that he kind of had an idea a little bit about, you know, what it is and what it does. The majority of people just think it's you know, something for their teeth. They're all familiar with it's supposed to be a benefit, and the majority of them or kind of regurgitate what their dentists are telling them, as their dentists are regurgitating what they're told, because the majority of dentists aren't even doing their research on fluoride. They're just just like the doctors out there when they're signing their prescriptions, they're just kind of taking the money and keeping quiet. And one thing that we found with this film is the majority of scientists, experts in the field that were willing to talk with us were already retired, or they kind of already out of the game. And that was alarming to me, just because I realized that even if the scientists or the expert, the dentists that are still practicing, even if they are aware of the dangers of fluoride, they're not going to say anything because their careers are on the line, and they don't want to jeopardize the program or their careers. And it's sad, but that's where we're at. And as far as the people that we did speak with, no one really knew about the toxic effects, the side effects to it. So it was pretty interesting getting out there on the street and enlightening people.
And the thing about fluoride with regard to teeth is the whole debate, and it is still up for debate whether fluoride is even good for your teeth, but it was supposed to be topical, wasn't it? You weren't supposed to swallow it and ingest it.
Right. That's the whole thing. I mean, even topically, there's science that's coming out today that states that it doesn't even have any topical benefits to it. So, but yeah, you're not supposed to swallow the toothpaste. What makes you think you're supposed to swallow it in the water? Don't you remember? And this is one thing that I would tell people on the street is, don't you remember getting your fluoride treatments as a kid? The gel that you would bite into. And everybody remembers that because, they make them, that's the best part of the whole dental, when I was getting my teeth cleaned as a kid, it was like, they had the bubble gum flavor, the watermelon flavor, but you're not supposed to swallow it. Well, that treatment was 12,500 part per million, which is why the nurse would run in the room every 5 minutes, a few minutes, and say, don't swallow it. Did you swallow it? Don't swallow it. And they'd have the sucker in there and taking all the saliva out. They make you spit and rinse a couple dozen times. And when I put that into perspective for the people out in the street, you can see the light bulb clicking and going, oh yeah, I do remember that. I do remember not being being told not to swallow. There's kids that have died right in the dentist office, right during their fluoride treatments. So it's extremely toxic.
Now we know some of the financial motives behind putting fluoride in the water. Of course, it's a cheap way of disposing a toxic substance. But the film's called The Great Culling. I mean, you've got the Georgia Guidestones there at the start. How do you tie in fluoride as a tool of population reduction? How are the two connected?
Well, and this is we've come under a lot of attack for the title of the film, and it was one of the reasons why it took a little longer for us to put this thing out, because we didn't get the support like they got on What in the World Are They Spraying, and it was a nefarious title, and I liked it, Paul liked it. People either love it or they hate it, but you're right, we do touch on the Georgia Guidestones, and the series, this film, these 3 parts. Part 2 is on GMOs and vaccination program. Part 3 is we're gonna circle around and touch on the geoengineering our air. But the 3 of them together, there's no doubt that what is going on here is this, I think personally, and the majority of people that I interviewed, even though they wouldn't say it publicly, they'll all admit that fluoride causes cancer. Fluoride causes we have 50,000 people that die each year in America due to cancers that were spawned by fluoride. So if it's a slow kill. It's not like an immediate kill out in the street. And that's the hard thing that people are having a hard time digesting, is that, wait a minute, they're not trying to kill us. Well, they are. It's just they're doing it very slowly and methodically, and they're doing it over the course of time. In addition to that, they're the same people that have the power and ability to put this stuff into our water are on the other end selling you the cure and the treatment, the pill, the prescription drug. And ironically enough, the prescription drug contains fluoride. So, You know, it's a slow kill. Alex mentioned this. Alex is actually going to be in our film too. We have him for part 2 and 3. We didn't really discuss much of fluoride with him when we interviewed him, but he'll be making a cameo in part 2 and 3 of the film. So we're excited about that.
That's good to hear. So we got, you know, what is it, 70% of America's water supply now fluoridated, 45 of the 50 largest cities in America now with fluoridated water. Whereas, as you mentioned before, Europe's basically scaling it down. There are a few areas in the UK that still have it, 97% of European countries don't. So we've seen success on some fronts with people actually getting it out of their water. And I guess that's the biggest question, Chris. How can people lobby to get the fluoride removed from their local water supply?
It's a good question. And that's kind of what this film is about, the power of communication. It's what you're doing right there. It's what I'm doing. As I mentioned earlier, you know, you don't have to have a blowhorn sitting out on the corner. You pick up the phone. Every bottled water that we tested, because we tested the majority of bottled waters that we could get our hands on, every single one of them had fluoride, levels of fluoride in it. But what's important is they all have 1-800 numbers on the side of the bottle, consumer affair numbers. Call them up. Let's say you have a specific brand that you like. Call them up. Ask them what the fluoride level is. Once they tell you what the level is, because in this we're the only country that doesn't put the fluoride level on the label either. Just like the GMOs, we won't label. You go to Mexico, anywhere else, they'll have the fluoride level on the label. In the United States, we just put the fat content. But, you know, spread the word. We interviewed former Congresswoman and Senator Karen Johnson, and one thing that she had mentioned to us when she was in office, that if she received 5 to 7 phone calls from her constituents on a daily basis on an issue, her desk was completely wiped clean, and that was the focus for her team for the day. That's 5 phone calls to a Congresswoman. So the power of communication does work. You know, you know, pick up the phone, show up at a town meeting, call your representatives up. You know, I've got a phone number for the White House right here if you guys want it. I mean, and I've called it, and then it works. They'll answer your call. They'll take your, you know, they'll take your information, whatever you want down. But it's what it's all about, the power of communication. You got it. If it's important to you and your children, which really what this is all about, and ourselves, you know, we all have loved ones that have succumbed to one of these side effects. There's no doubt. I mean, 75% of us are going to succumb to some type of cancer. So is it a culling? Yes. Is it happening overnight? No. Does it take a little while? Yeah. If you swallow a tube of toothpaste, it could happen overnight. So that number for the White House, in case anybody wants it, it's area code 202-456-1111. You call that up and let them know how you feel. Who knows, you'll probably get thrown on a list, but if you want to play it safe, contact the bottled water company. Start there. Contact your local, you know, city council members. You know, send them a copy of our film. Make a copy of it, burn it, send it off to them. That's the only way we're going to do this. You know, we did have some success. You know, if you look across the United States, we're seeing communities that are pushing fluoride right out of their communities. So, you know, we had a city like San Diego last year who lost the battle. They've been fighting it for 60 years successfully, and they just lost the battle. You know, if we have a big city like San Diego who's losing the battle, then we have, what, I think 11 communities last year who were able to force it out. So it's this give and take thing. Right now we're just about 75% fluoridated in this country, and we're growing. But at the same time, a small number of underground people are coming up and becoming knowledgeable, and they're making us think about it. And more importantly, they're educating the people who can make the decisions.
The Great Culling, Our Water is the film. It's available right now at the INFOWARS store. Chris, any other websites where people can go to get more information?
Yeah, we've got our own website as well. Yeah, definitely go to Alex's store where we're selling it. But if you want to check us out, we're thegreatculling.com. and that's CULLING. A lot of people aren't really aware of the great culling and what the culling means, and I'll just let everybody know now. It's a thinning of the herd, and we're the herd.
Chris Maple, we appreciate you joining us, and with the other 2 films coming out in the near future, we'll be sure to speak to you again. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Every 4 years, the United States of America hears the drumbeat of billions of campaign dollar attack ads, meaningless debate with empty analysis in poll after poll after poll. This can only mean one thing. It's time to pick our globalist puppet leader.
We're going to be left with a choice of a lesser of 2 evils. And I'm saying I don't go out with evils, I don't deal with evils, I don't do business with evils, I don't hang out with evils. Why would I vote for an evil to run my life or run my country?
Will it be globalist puppet A or puppet B?
They continue to vote for these Democrats and Republicans, the people that are wrecking our country, and yet they still vote for them.
Unlike North Korea and China, we Americans have the illusion of choice this November 6th.
I think that a lot of votes are going to be stolen.
I don't know how you could possibly have voter fraud when your son owns the voting machines.
1.4 million votes were lost, spoiled as they call them in the biz, through these so-called glitches.
The choice is not up to you. Which management team from Slavery Incorporated will run our country into oblivion for the next 4 years? Tune in to INFOWARS.com or PrisonPlanet.tv this Tuesday, November 6th, as another meaningless pageant is played out.